Hello, this is J.W. Greenbaum bringing you our fourth special episode on knives so far. And to be honest, I think this is also our most special episode on knives so far. This is the adventures of the traveling Elk Ridge Stockman. So, what is the traveling Elk Ridge Stockman other than what you've probably gleaned as the knife under the camera? Well, Tom over at Knife Delights. Please go subscribe to that channel, by the way. Please go over and subscribe to the channel. You will not regret it. Also, I would highly encourage you to, if you're any kind of a history buff, subscribe to its sister channel, which is History Delights. So please go over there and subscribe. So Tom got the idea of taking a pass around and then doing it a step further, which is to say, not merely, just doing a pass around and then having everybody do a different review of the knife, but also passing around elements of ourselves, which is to say, things that we associate with us, things that are kind of part of our personalities, letters, swag, various things that, are us, really. And so Tom encouraged the sending of swag, gifts, notes, and the first channel that got sent the Traveling Stockman was RJ's Knives. And I'm going to tell you right now, go over, subscribe to RJ's Knives. I have already tagged him in a vid. I've already said, go subscribe to his channel. Trust me, you are really going to like it. I mean, he has an open tag out right now on which do you like better, thumb studs or flippers. I mean, like he is just really, really creative and really goes at this with an enthusiasm that you rarely see. After him came J.O. Ventures Outdoors. Now, J.O. Ventures Outdoors was the gentleman who added this slip. And John, it looks wonderful. I mean, it'll disappear from the review. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, so, I mean, you get this little bear here, and there have been subsequent channels. Everyone's been saying, yeah, well, you've got an elk here, so does that mean the bear eats the elk? I mean, after all, it is a knife slip, so maybe there's a little bit of maybe it's a little bit more appropriate than we thought. But he did a fine review of it, and then it went to one of my favorite slip joint channels, period. And not just slip joint channels, but also traditional knife channels in general, and that is Tobias Gibson. If you have not listened to Tobias, you're missing out. I mean, he has so much knowledge of this hobby going back decades and decades and decades. We're talking into the 1800s, possibly even earlier. So if you ever wanted to check something out about, let's say, your father's knife, or your grandfather's knife, or your great-grandfather's knife, chances are Tobias will know something about that. And he did a magnificent review of this knife. Oh, and by the way, one thing I can sympathize with Tobias on, he and we like to go on. Anyway, he sent it to Wasted Beer Money. And I actually thought that Wasted Beer Money's review of this knife was one of the most sincere, one of actually the coolest. And that's not because Wasted Beer Money is a traditional guy, but it's because he's not a traditional guy. As in, he is more of a modern knife type person. So, you gotta admire somebody who's stepping outside their comfort zone and using this knife in a variety of modern EDC tasks and, putting their toe in the water of the traditional hobby. That's awesome. I love it when that happens. And by the way, the same is true of vice versa when somebody who has been steeped in the traditional hobby will step into the modern hobby and say, hey, yeah, I like this particular given folder, or fixed blade, or what have you. Well, he also does beer reviews, so I warn you, if you are, let's just say his channel name is not, it's rather literal. So yeah, you can go crazy if you like your beer, if you like your cold ones. Now, irony. I like my beer, but I don't like my cold ones. If you're English, you understand what I mean. That's right, I drink room temperature beer. And I drink room temperature soda, for that matter. And as a follow-up to the very unfortunate review that Wasted Beer Money had to give to that one Not Your Father's root beer, well, I prepared myself for this interview with a Sprecher root beer. Generally speaking, Sprecher is one of the best root beers in the country. By the way, the whole root beer thing started when Tobias Gibson observed that the Traveling Stockman had covers that, while described by the Elk Ridge website as brown resin, reminded him of root beer. And by the way, I fully see I see that. I mean, like, yeah, this is root beer to me. That is not brown resin. That's root beer. Yeah, Sprecher. If you live in the Midwest, you should be able to get Sprecher at a Kroger if they got them, and if they don't have a Kroger, then you should be able to get it at a more like a specialty store. It is, again, the third best root beer that I have ever tasted. And Kroger out here stocks them. So I am in heaven. There are only two better root beers that I have ever had. Those are Cap and Eli's, which is sold in Maine, New Hampshire, and I think it is sold in some areas of Massachusetts, although I'm not sure. So if you're in Massachusetts and you can get Cap and Eli's, don't miss your chance. Go get some. And the other brand, the best root beer that I've ever had, is called Henry Weinhard's. If you live in the Northwest, do yourself a favor. Get Henry Weinhard's root beer. It is the best root beer that I've ever tasted. Now, if you are a more casual root beer drinker, I would say that the best root beer that you can possibly get at your average national store is IBC root beer. So, if you're that more casual person, go get some IBC. The point is, this Stockman is, as Tobias described it, this has root beer covers on it. And in honor of it, drink a root beer. That's my request to you. Drink a root beer. So, what about the swag? What about the other stuff that got sent? Oh, and by the way, I received this from the very next person that Wasted Beer Money sent it to, which is to say North Star Knife Reviews. And he is doing a couple of other pass-arounds that are based on the same idea, which I also happen to be signed up for. So that's Ray at North Star Knife Reviews. And here's Ray's note to me. Hey JW, here's the traveling knife from Tom at Knife Delights. Looking forward to your review. I'm enclosing a cap lifter / bottle opener that I made, and use it in good health. Stay sharp, Ray, North Star Knife Reviews. Now, to show you what Ray's talking about, yeah, that is nice. Ray, I just have to say thank you. I mean, thank you. Somebody who uses cap lifters and bottle openers a lot, and not just for cold ones, or I should say beers, because I'm trying to get around, I'm trying to keep this kind of G-rated, and I say cold ones, but I drink room temperature beer. Sue me. But one of the things that I liked, that I just thought was wonderful, was you'll see a lot of whittled pieces where what somebody will do is, where it ends, they'll take a little metal end cap and cap it and pin it. I personally prefer the style that Ray has done here, where what he's done is he has just taken the wood and left it in the raw. Personally, I prefer that style. As someone who whittles myself, well, I just, there you go. Now, as far as the swag that came, in addition to the gift, there is some swag that I'm going to be keeping. There is some swag that I'm going to be sending on. I think I will show you what I'm going to be sending on first, which is to say these stickers for Knife Delights, because I have a bunch of them. There's only one that was differently sized, which was the first one that I showed you, that I will be keeping, because I do not have one of those. So, okay. Next one is a Civivi sticker, and I know that the gentleman who I'm sending this to likes Civivi, so, yeah. Civivi. And 2 large-sized Smoky Mountain Knife Works stickers. Plus my own stuff. I'm not going to say what that is. I like surprises. I don't like being the recipient of surprises, but I like surprising people. I realize that could be construed as hypocritical, but, well, it's a good thing in this case. So yeah, I'm keeping one of these. I am keeping one of these Smoky Mountain Knife Works stickers because I do not have one in this size. They're actually a little bit smaller. So for some reason, Smoky Mountain Knife Works has decided to change it up, and I don't really know why. Next one is a business card for Addicted to Blades, who I am subscribed to. Follow him on Instagram, subscribe to his channel. I would highly recommend you do that. Really, really fun channel. There is this Kaiser microfiber cloth, and I am replacing this with a different microfiber cloth. I'm not going to say what microfiber cloth, but I am going to say that I am replacing it with a different microfiber cloth. Now, this looks intriguing. I haven't checked them out yet, but this says Toby's Sideshow Scale Styrene. Well, Styrene, to a model maker like myself, is what they make the kits for, model airplanes, model cars, model ships, etc. out of. Even scenery for those, as well as the figures in my scales are 1/48th scale and 1/72nd scale, although I do every now and then build a 1/35th scale armor model, and I do every now and then build a 1/44th scale airplane model, but usually 1/48th scale armor and airplanes and 1/72nd scale airplanes. And finally, and I'm not going to test it, or I have tested it, but I'm not going to test it on camera, a Blade HQ lighter. So why aren't you going to test it on camera? Simple. There's a smoke alarm that is over my head almost directly, and in regard to that, it's also tied into my home security system, so it would bring the fire department, and we really, really don't want that. So, yeah, let's not do that. But let's move on to the Stockman. So, let's bring in something to compare with it. Because as a matter of fact, as luck would have it, I do have a knife that is not totally and completely different. This is a Rough Rider Black and Blue series. And yes, I know it has the letter R on the bolster. I know that every single Rough Rider purist is going to just start like holding their hands up like I'm Dracula, like they're Dracula, and I'm holding an onion or something like that, or not garlic, not an onion, garlic. What's wrong with me? So first off, let's do some comparisons here. These are about the same size, and by the way, I would like to run in, for those of you who are not traditional knife people, 2 modern knives. And they're the only 2 modern knives I'm going to feature in the review. They're going to be very brief. This is the Ontario Knives Rat Model 1. Obviously, we can see that this is much, much larger than both of these. And this is the Ontario Knives Rat Model 2, which is, again, much, much larger. So what we're looking at is we are looking at 2 very small knives, but there is another size comparison I'm going to make that is in the more traditional range. This is the Rough Rider Reserve Common Stock. This is basically a large Stockman that has had the spay blade replaced with a bottle opener / screwdriver. And as we can see, it's a large Stockman is kind of in that same range as at least regarding the handle scales, as the Rat Model 2, whereas these are much, much smaller. So, just in case you're thinking about, okay, what would that look like for my potential everyday carry rotation, like maybe that's a good office knife. And well, it is certainly a good office knife, but let's say you maybe want a traditional type work knife. Well, maybe you want something a little bit bigger, something along the lines of this. And if not this exact knife, then something in this size class. So yeah, just letting you know, we're not talking huge knives here. So with those put away, let's take a look at the blades. First, on the elk ridge, we can see that there is no half stop. We have match strike pull right there. We have match strike pulls all around, obviously. Elk ridge says right there. This is a Turkish clip. It is in 3CR13 MOV, as are the other blades. And, well, let's compare it to the main blade on the Rough Rider. The Rough Rider, as we can see, has a half stop. We also see that it has a more downward sweep, in addition to the obvious long pulls. But pretend for a minute that the long pulls aren't there. We also got the slanted bolsters, but that's a little bit, yeah, that's a little bit less, that's not quite going to matter as much. And yeah, you can see that we are coming in very, very similarly here. This is a very, very much just exponentially shorter blade, or sorry, it's just a tiny little bit shorter blade, and than this does. But you can see this downward sweep, and this is more of an angular blade on the elk ridge. So let's go to our secondary blade. The secondary blade on... Oh, and by the way, one thing to keep in mind that I just want you to remember. On the back here it says ER953BR, stainless, custom design. Keep those last two words, custom design, in mind. Okay? So the next blade, obviously, if you know anything about Stockman's, is going to be our sheep's foot blade. Now, here's the unusual part, is that there's a soft half stop on the elk ridge, where there was no half stop whatsoever on the main blade. With the Rough Rider, well, obviously you heard the half stop. I don't really think I need to show you, but there's also, you can see there's this downward slant, like, and obviously you can also, you see a swedge right there as well, but the real difference is, I mean, check out how slanted that is. And, you know, one of the things you do with a blade like this is detail work. So, you know, you're going to want to get in there. You're going to want to, you know, be able to do, you know, kind of maybe get into the crevices and stuff. Having that blade at an angle like this is going to really help. On the other hand, having it just like this, that would be more friendly to almost whittling, I would think. So next up is what I would say is, without question, our most different blade. And I'm actually going to open it on the Rough Rider first, because I think you're probably expecting what's going to be on the Rough Rider, which is to say a spay blade. Again, it's angled down a bit. That's fine. Again, it's intended for detail work. Now, much like the other blade, much like the sheep's foot, this is not angled down. What is unusual about it, as we can see here, is the shape of the blade. Indeed, I would almost call this a clipped spay, because I have never seen a spay blade that has looked quite like this before. This is your classic spay blade. Now, in case you're wondering, well, what was the purpose of the spay blade? The answer would be, how do I get this G-rated? Preventing your livestock from reproducing when you didn't want them to. Let's say that, let's say that you had a bull that was mating with too many cows, and, well, a spay blade is probably going to solve that issue. And indeed, in many of the catalogs from the 1920s and 1930s, these were not called spay blades. They just out and out called them what they were, which is to say, and I quote, castrator blades. So the steel on the Rough Rider is 440. And by the way, just as a bit of humor, do you see how it says 440 razor sharp steel? I got news for you guys. As with every single knife in existence, it isn't going to be razor sharp unless you maintain it. But the steel for this is actually kind of an interesting one, because initially they tried to hide it, or I think they tried to hide it, but fortunately Smoky Mountain Knife Works and the people therein managed to uncover what it was, which is to say 3CR13 MOV. Now, believe it or not, I have actually worked with that steel. It's incredibly stainless. It does not hold an edge for particularly long, but if you wanted to use this as a letter opener, or break down Kleenex boxes or cereal boxes with it, believe me, you could easily do that. I mean, this is not a hard-use knife in any way. This is not a heavy-duty work knife. But certainly you could do a lot of things with this. You could cut tags off of, hang tags, and, to change them. Another thing you could do is, let's say you're at a formal event, and you notice a thread that's, well, you don't want people to notice that, and, well, just, take out your knife and cut it off. 3CR will get you through certain situations. Now, there are certain situations it won't get you through. I mean, if you're blasting down a cardboard box, then, yeah, you're probably going to want the Rough Rider. But 3CR is basically 420J2, chemically speaking. So if you have any experience with 420J2, which is, I mean, again, that's an okay steel. It's just that it's not something that is a hard-use steel. And unfortunately, I don't have a method of measuring toughness, but I do know that it is very stainless. So that is, again, something that would make it ideal for pocket carry. And by the way, before we start, dissing on 420J2, well, 420, if you take maybe a half step up in edge retention from this steel, you have the Victorinox steel. And nobody really complains about that. So there you go. But what I really wanted to talk about was the company that makes these, which is to say Elk Ridge. Or, well, not Elk Ridge, actually, because Elk Ridge is just a brand. And if you take a look at that elk, you may think it looks familiar. Like, let's say you have a Browning Satori shotgun or a Browning Auto 5 late model, with the more modern logo on it. Yeah, you're going to recognize that. That looks like the Browning logo for Browning firearms. So it's like, yeah, were they inspired by that? They may very well have been, because Elk Ridge is a sub-brand of a firm called Master Cutlery. Master Cutlery is a knife maker that has at least 4 and possibly up to 6 OEMs. And it really depends on who the OEM is regarding the quality of the knife that you get. Now, I actually did manage to find that there were at least 4 OEMs that I could identify. The remaining 2 I was not certain of, but these 4 I am. The first OEM, which seems to be the most prolific and which has never taken a break from manufactures traditional style or traditional styled fixed blades. Again, they are in 3CR, although apparently some of them are also in 7CR, 17 MOV, which you may know because of its use by Gerber. Then there is the OEM that does these, along with lockbacks that are traditional style, as well as, surprisingly, modern fixed blades. This OEM seems to be in the process of retooling. If you go onto Smoky Mountain Knife Works' website, then what you will find is that, yes, there are a few models in stock, and almost all of them are brand new models. As a matter of fact, let's say that you want a Stockman that's basically like this, with 3CR blades and everything. In fact, you can get one for $7.99. But you can't get it with these handle covers. There is something you can get, and I will get to that in a moment. But if you go onto Smoky Mountain Knife Works and you look for a knife called the Gentleman's Pearl, that's this Stockman, except it has a much more traditional looking spay blade on it. And I believe it might be approximately 1/4 of an inch longer. Maybe. I don't know. The point is that it does look to be very well executed, and it also looks like it's gotten some very good reviews from the people that have stopped in to review it, which is excellent. Now, again, 3CR blades, but keep in mind they are marketing it as a gentleman's knife. But say you want these root beer covered scales, or these root beer colored scales, rather. Well, they have a small muskrat that they have in what they call red abalone, but which is basically this, only they lightened it a little bit. Believe me, it's the same. Well, you can get that small muskrat, and you can get these gorgeous handle scales. Not trivial. And by the way, you can get it for less than $10. Also not trivial. Let me just move that in, lest anyone thinks that I'm trying to steal this thing. I'm not. As much as I love it, much as I'm dying for it. But anyway, back on topic. So it seems they're revamping their line, because they're also doing the same thing with their modern fixed blades. So yeah, the OEM that makes the traditional slip joints and modern fixed blades is revamping itself. Now, there is a third OEM that seems to make traditional knives with lockback mechanisms. I am not entirely sure if it's the same OEM that does these, or if it is one of the, I should say, how do we put this? Unknown OEMs, but they seem to have a much more, I'll put it this way. Their designs seem to have changed far less than the slip joints seem to have changed. So, if at all. So, that's something that struck me as very interesting. If they're overhauling the lines at one OEM and they're just keeping everything the same, then perhaps you're looking at two different OEMs. Now, finally, do you remember when I said, remember the words custom design? Master Cutlery is very fond of using those words. And on their modern locking folders, they employ them quite often. Unfortunately, their modern locking folders, unlike their traditional traditional style fixed blades, as well as their slip joints, their modern fixed blades, and what I believe to be their lockbacks as well, their traditional lockbacks, their modern fixed blades, or their modern folders are objectively horrible. I say this because a good representative of the quality that they put into this, or that they put into these modern folders, is the Master Cutlery Z Hunter ZB138 GN, which is to say Nick Shabazz's channel knife. Ouch. And I've been able to document problems that they have had relating to the lock bar engaging on their liner locks, and believe it or not, their frame locks, because apparently they have some, where the only thing that will hold open is the assist spring. I have documented problems with literally non-existent heat treats, which is to say that a person will literally be cutting a box and it will actually dull partway through cutting an Amazon box down. As in completely dull out. That isn't a heat treat. That's just, I don't know what that is. Indeed, Pete from Cedric Ada Outdoors, when he tried testing the edge on the Z Hunter, he actually it dulled out on the first cut on the factory edge. He sharpened it himself because, hey, possibility of a burnt edge. He got 4 cuts, and then that was it. He could not get anything more out of it. So, unfortunately, I have to say that Master Cutlery's modern folders are a disaster. And I would also call them an albatross around the neck of Master Cutlery. If the company really wants to revitalize itself, then it would make these knives. It would also make its fixed blades because they don't have any complaints about them. And similar, be they the traditionals or the more modern fixed blades. Similarly, there seemed to be no complaints about the lockbacks. They actually did seem to lock up and not develop blade wobble or blade play, which is a good thing. You want that, especially in a lockback where, somebody who has maybe grown up during the 1960s, 1970s, 1950s, who has been told a lockback is the strongest knife that you can possibly have, they're going to rely on that. They're going to see the price. They're going to go, yeah, this is what I want. And, the traditional look. And so far, I haven't seen too many complaints. So perhaps it would be nice if Master Cutlery could, at the very least for the time, shut down its manufacture of modern folders and focus on these. Think of all the money that they would be able to save. Perhaps rather than churning out Z Hunters, they would be able to upgrade the steel, say from 3CR13 MOV to 7CR17 MOV, which may sound like, to some of you, like just upgrading from one alphabet or alphanumeric soup steel to another, but which in reality is a true upgrade. I've worked with 7CR17 MOV. Honestly, so long as you keep it stropped, so long as you keep it honed, so long as you keep it sharpened, it will do fine. And it will get you through more situations than will 3CR13 MOV. It's also more stainless. And the best part is that it costs only a handful of pennies more. We're not talking, a lot of money here. We're talking a handful of pennies more to give this 7CR17 blades than if it had 3CR13 blades. Just something to think about. If perhaps you'd like to see Master Cutlery continue on making Z Hunters and the like. Overall, I think this company has a lot of promise, provided they focus on knives like this and avoid the likes of Z Hunter and knives of that quality. In the end, I would say that the traveling Stockman, which I have only used very, very lightly, I've only used it to break down a single Kleenex box, although I did use all 3 blades on it, is definitely something that you could easily carry into an office environment, maybe even use as a letter opener. That it would really be
a cool thing to have in your office. And let's face it, this isn't going to scare anybody. Root beer? Who's afraid of root beer? Now, of course, I have been saving one thing until the end of this review, which is to say the channel that I am going to send this to. The channel that I am going to send this to, and whom I also recommend that you subscribe to, is Pete, aka the Jersey Knife Guy. Absolutely wonderful, and if you want to see some massive collections of Rough Riders, believe me, you're gonna be impressed. Also, he has the modern queen cutlery that is basically a sort of upscale Rough Rider line. And I was actually watching one of his videos where he got one of the first batches of queen cutlery, and I'm like, yeah, I have to get some of these. And yeah, that's what there are more than a few on my wish list on Smoky Mountain Knife Works. So this has been J.W. Greenbaum. This has been yet another installment of the Traveling Elk Ridge Stockman. And I will be sending this to the Jersey Knife Guy along with my own letter and my own swag, in addition to that which I promised I would keep sending along. And I would highly recommend that you go out and treat yourself to a Sprecher, or at the very least an IBC, in honor of the Traveling Stockman. Have a great day.